Hey, everybody, we're doing notes. So can you look up here, please? Happy Monday. Hope you had a good weekend. We've got a couple more sections to cover. We're going to cover them today and Wednesday, and then we're going to review and practice on Friday and Monday and test on that following Wednesday. So, hey, thanks. Oh, this person's not here. Should maybe just, yeah. All right, thanks. All right. Hey, everybody, we're going to talk about static, and I don't mean radio static. We've seen the word static all year, public static void string, main string args in every single REPL. I'm going to explain it today. Static implies that a method or variable belongs to the whole class rather than just its little spot. It's you'll see. So a static variable belongs to the class itself, the entire class. So if you had a static variable called name and then you created 3 objects and one was named Bob, one was named Sarah, and one was named Alice, they would all be named Alice because there's only one name. If it's a static variable, there's really just one name and they're all using it. So if you had a 2-string and you made these objects and then you printed them, they would all say they were the same name. So you don't use this lightly. You don't just like, oh, now let's use everything static. But if you want something like a unique ID that will get given to each object that you create, that's typically when you use a static variable. Do you have your hand up? No problem. So look at this example. It gives us a unique ID number for each book in this book class. So I create a private static int called next ID, set it to 1001, and then I have another int called ID. And that's the one where we're going to keep track of each book's ID. And then when I create a new book, I set the title to the right title, and then I say ID equal to next ID. But then it's important to change next ID. Otherwise, they would all have the same ID. It would be just as pointless as having them all have the same ID. So anyway, if you did this, the first book would be 1001, second one would be 1002, third 1003, and so the next ID, I like to name the static variable something clear, like next ID rather than just ID, because then you'll be confused. You're like, well, which ID are we talking about? So this just says what I just said. And if we ran this code, I made a book called Unforgettable and another book called Amnesiac Diaries. And if I printed them, they each have their own ID because every time you create a book, it sets the next ID to the next one. That's for a given run of the code, obviously. If you ran the code again tomorrow, it'd be back at 1001, or every time you run it. Here's another example with a ticket class. I'm saying the next number of the ticket is 1999. And here we're just adding 1 to the next number before we use it in the class. So there's no rule that says you have to change it after you use it. But this obviously, hopefully, it would create, since it's adding 1 to it before it uses it, it's 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003. So then my code just prints D, which prints 2003, and it prints A, which prints 2000. So a common mistake, and this will show up in the assignments I give you, is if you are doing it wrong and then you print D, it shows 2003, and then you print A and it also shows 2003. That would mean that you were doing it wrong because A should be the first ID number, which is 2000, not. So on these assignments, like from here out for this unit, I'll be saying, create a couple of these things to show that it works, and then print the first one to show that it still has the ID that it was supposed to have at the very beginning. That you didn't lose that. So here, if we just use the static variable, things would be funky. This is the wrong way to do it. Private static int next num, and we just add 1 every time. they would all be 2003. You're like, okay, well, this is useless. I mean, I guess it's not useless if you want to keep track of how many they were, but that's not what we were trying to do here. So slightly different things, shifting gears. A static method belongs to the class as a whole, and it's not allowed to change or access private class variables. So mostly this is something you're not going to have to worry about, but on the AP test, there might be a multiple choice question that quizzed you on this, and I wouldn't let it stress you, but here's an example. So we have a class called thing, private int var A, private static int var B, public static void, set vals, int x. We try to set both these variables to x. This is just a static method, and you get an error when you try to compile this. It says non-static variable var A cannot be referenced from a static context. So look, this var A is just a variable, a regular private int for the whole class. And when this static method tries to access it, it's not allowed to. And so you can't even code that. I mean, it won't let you run it. Marcus.
Could you do a static method that has input thing other and then return other dot variable?
I don't totally follow, but you can't access var A from this method no matter what tricks you pull. It's not going to let you do it.
Because the things have to line up.
I think, notice it lets you change the static variable. A static method can change the static variable. You'd have to have other code that did what you wanted. I mean, I don't even know why you would want to do this. I'm just supposed to tell you about it. I wouldn't worry about it. I've never written a static method like this in my whole life. But it shows up sometimes. And I wanted you to say, oh yeah, I remember. Static method can't access non-static variables. It can only access static variables. So the static method, what I just said, is not allowed to change that regular non-static variable. All right, so mostly we see this public static void main string args, and that's the thing Java looks for when it wants to run a program. So we also do methods like public static something, and that's when we have a method that we just want to do something. We want it to, you send it something and it returns something. That's it's fine. I want to back up for a sec and show you a couple things about methods. Method headers have 5 parts. The access level, which is public or private, that's required. You have to have a public something or private something. Ownership, and that's whether it's static or not. That means, does the whole class own it, or is it object by object? And so you don't have to have the word static. So it's just whether static or not is included. You have to have a return type. That's either void or int, Boolean, string, or it could return an object. The identifier is the name of the method. And then the parameter list. So either you have empty parentheses, which means there's no parameters, or you have some parameters in here. Here's some examples. Public string, toString. So this is the access level, the return type, and the identifier. And the parameter list is empty. Public, void, set GPA. This one has 4 of the 5 things, and then the bottom one here has all 5 things: private, static, void, change next ID, and all right. So for today, I'm going to ask you to write 2 new classes that use static variables. In fact, the first one, I give you the student class. I'm not asking you to write a student class. I just want you to add a unique student ID to it, and then you're going to write a voter class from scratch. And every voter has their own ID, and that's what we're doing today. Questions?